Welcome to Lesson 2, Lecture 2 in Module 1, the realist view. For realists, the most important aspect of the international relations is that of anarchy. So we need to get an understanding of what anarchy means. Well, anarchy does not mean chaos. It doesn't mean that everything is bad. What anarchy means is that there is no central governing authority. So in international relations we can see that this is true because there is no world government that can come in and stop disputes between countries. The UN comes close, but the UN depends on member countries to enforce its decisions. It has no independent authority, and it has no independent power, its own military or that sort of thing, to enforce solutions to problems. And so it's left to states to fend for themselves. Well, what does this mean for states in the international systems? Well, just as I said, it means that states have to take care of themselves. So anarchy can exacerbate collective action problems because one way to overcome collective action problems is through a government that can enforce rules for the greater good. In our original discussion of the commons, a government can set rules for the number of cattle that each individual farmer can allow on the commons at any one time, and can enforce that. If farmers begin bringing more cattle than what they're allowed, the state can either confiscate those cattle or fine the farmer or that sort of thing that can enforce that and overcome problems of collective action. Well, in the international system there isn't that government, so states, all solutions to problems have to be decided upon, agreed upon, and enforced by a group of states acting together. So it exacerbates the collective action problem because then those states also have an incentive to cheat and do what's best for themselves individually, even if that exacerbates problems with the commons. Second very important concept is that of sovereignty. In fact, the authors of the textbook call sovereignty the most important norm in international relations. The idea of state sovereignty was solidified after the Treaty of Westphalia in 1648. That's the treaty that ended the 100 Years' War. And that was a war that was fought over kings' rights to decide the religion that they and their own subjects would follow within their own territory. And the Treaty of Westphalia gave them the right to decide that. And so today, sovereignty means that states are autonomous and that they answer to no higher authority, and that states are not supposed to, and in fact rarely do, meddle in each other's internal affairs. And so states pretty much have a free rein within their own territory to do what they want to do. Well, this can exacerbate the security dilemma. So in this example I'll talk about Ukraine and Russia. So if Ukraine wants to make sure that Russia doesn't take over portions of its territory in the south, in Crimea for instance, they can't call on some sort of world police force to come and tell Russia to back down if Russia is making noise that they want to take over that area. What Ukraine can do is make itself stronger to make it costly for Russia to try to take it over. Well, if in State 1, which is Ukraine, if State 1 has a fear or distrust of State 2, Russia for instance, they may, the leaders within Ukraine may decide that it's better for them to become more powerful and to arm themselves, and so they may increase their military strength. They may call up more soldiers, they may buy more tanks, do these things so that in case Russia decides to do something, they're prepared. Well, at the bottom of this graph you see that Russia will then see these moves by Ukraine and perhaps think, well, Ukraine is getting too powerful, they may want to take over part of our territory. And so that can lead to Russia feeling insecure, having fear, and arming themselves. And so this can lead to a cycle. This is known as a security dilemma. When it involves arms, as I have put here, this can be known as an arms race, where states are racing to build up their own particular military power. And it can lead to a spiral of distrust and fear. Alright, balance of power. A lot of theories within realism depend on this idea of the power of states, and that states do counterbalance and try to make sure that there's enough power on one side to defeat the other side. Counterbalancing occurs frequently and maintains stability in the system. In the balance of power theory, alliances play a key role for balancing. There is also a within the balance of power, the idea is that you have two sides of relatively equal strength, but what we see in real life is that there are many states that bandwagon or join with the more powerful side, and they may do this for a couple of reasons. One may be that they want to enjoy the spoils of whatever win would take place in a conflict between the two groups, or it may be that states balance against threat and not power, and that even if there's one group of states that has more power, if those states don't want to or don't appear to be trying to cause trouble, that those groups of states may fear other states more than the more powerful states, and so join. So more recent concepts of the balance of power discuss the idea that states do balance against the threat of problems rather than just pure power. We talk about a lot in international relations about great powers. Well, great powers are the states that are significantly more powerful than the average state. And this power can be either formal, real power, military power, versus informal, or what we call soft power, with influence and other things. Today's great powers, a good list to start for today's great powers are the members of the United Nations Security Council. That's the United States, China, France, Russia, and Great Britain. Some may consider Japan to be a great power based on its economic abilities, and Germany is sometimes also considered a great power, but without that formal membership on the UN Security Committee, they don't have as much power in world affairs as do those five great powers. There are also middle powers, states that are kind of in between the average and the great powers. States such as India, Canada, perhaps, would fit in with this particular group of states. And we don't have a lot of theories about middle powers when we talk about them, and so this is kind of maybe an understudied area within international relations. So how power is distributed among states is important to many theories in realism. In neo-realism, there is essentially the view that a unipolar, or a world in which one one group has the power, or one state has the power, is the most stable. But the second most stable is a bipolar world in which there are two distinct spheres of power, and that was the kind of world that we lived in during the Cold War. There's a spelling error here in multipolar. A multipolar world is what we had in the 19th and early 20th century, the concert of Europe, where we had a number of great powers within the European continent that were constantly shifting alliances and kind of balancing against one another, but there was no clear group of two states or one state that had the advantage. Another potential distribution of power is a tripolar, where you have three states. Sometimes the triangle between Russia, the U.S., and China during the late 60s and early 1970s is thought of as being tripolar, but it's rare, and we don't really have any good theories about that. Another idea of power is that the actual balance of power doesn't matter. It's when states transition from being close to the same power to overtaking another power, that's what leads to conflict. It isn't the actual balance of power, but this kind of dynamic of one state becoming more powerful than the dominant state. And so there's kind of a literature and a group that looks at power transition theory as kind of the driving force behind major conflict between great powers in the world. So unipolarity, or another term for that is hegemony, is where there's one state that has a great deal of power, a great deal more power than other states. Historical examples include England during the late 18th and entire 19th century as the most powerful state in the system. Spain was the hegemon for a while, as was the Netherlands. The current hegemon is thought to be the United States. It's the most powerful country in the world and sets the norms for a lot of things that happen. There's a group that believes that hegemons create stability because they provide a similar level of stability as if you had a world government. This is that idea of dominance that we talked about in the very first lecture. It can reduce anarchy and aggression because it has the power to punish and reward behavior that it likes. And it can promote trade, and it does this oftentimes by providing a common currency and providing common rules that states can use when they trade with one another. So finally, as we end here, traditionally the U.S. has had public attitudes about U.S. involvement in the world as we are perhaps now the hegemon, that has alternated between being internationalist and isolationist, meaning that the U.S. public is uncomfortable with the U.S. being a hegemon and kind of dictating and being involved in world affairs to a great degree. So we'll end there with our discussion of power and the U.S.